Welcome back, everyone. I have another awesome guest tonight. I have best-selling author, lecturer, minister, counselor, and contactee, James Gilliland. James, thanks so much for joining us. How are you tonight?
Oh, doing great. How you doing?
Oh, I'm good. I thought we'd start with a little bit about your background and what got you started down your path.
Boy, it's a long story. I've had I had like a near-death experience when I was 5 years old, and that one blew me wide open. And then I had another drowning at 25, which kicked me back on again. And that kind of spawned about 30 years of intense training with yogis and lamas and every process-oriented therapy you can imagine, basically. And that's pretty much how things got started. And I was on an intense spiritual journey, my own self-healing and helping others, along the path. And then ships started showing up. So I found that contact comes with enlightenment. When you're on that path, you're going to be contacted.
Very interesting. Now, you said ships starting showing up.
Yeah.
Now, when did you have your first contact?
Well, I had, it's funny because Mary Rodwell's here right now, and she does a lot of hypnotic regressions and things like that. And I'm going to do one with her. I had some contacts when I was a kid. I didn't know what they were. They kind of freaked me out. They weren't negative. I just didn't understand them. And then finally, all my life, my dad was involved in Roswell, and my grandmother was a school teacher there. And she knew the responding highway, and he said, "Get out," and we get out, and he'd point up, and there'd be like 3 to 5 ships flying overhead. So, and he had an incident too in New Mexico where a ship landed on the highway, and he was the second car in, and blocked the highway for a while in New Mexico. So, seems to be a family history around this.
Wow. So, did the contact go any further than just seeing the ships?
Oh yeah. It
well, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it turned into face-to-face contact in the physical, and then interdimensional contact. Once I learned how to get out of the body and have experience like that, they have the technology to take you right out of your body and take you up on the ship. And it's hard to explain. We're not just a body and a personality. We're a spirit that has a body and a personality. And that spirit's multidimensional. So if you have a 6-dimensional being, they'll take you, up on your 6-dimensional body. But unless you do your homework, you won't remember it. You won't remember any of it. But the more you meditate, the more the veils come down, and it's easier to remember, what's happening or what's going on.
So could you maybe describe some of the beings that you had contact with?
Well, the ones that mostly have contact were Pleiadians. They're the ones, the very beautiful. They're our ancient ancestors. They actually helped terraform the planet along with 12 other major star nations, and they look like us, basically. Very, very beautiful. Some of them look like supermodels. They're very genetically refined. And they seem to be always women in the beginning. They were always females, and then the males came later.
So what kind of messages were they giving you in the beginning?
Well, almost, it's so funny because they give the same messages as the masters, basically. All the masters have been on the planet. They're very concerned about our consciousness and our environment and the way we behave towards each other and the planet. And basically, clean up our consciousness and clean up, our planet, basically. They want us to, evolve and keep going forward in evolution.
Now, you said the masters. Can you talk a little bit about that? Who are the masters?
Well, there's ascended masters from every race that actually just got off the wheel. They got off the wheel of reincarnation, and they're hanging out in the 5th dimension on up. And so when you get out of the fourth dimension, there's many, many levels within the fourth dimension. And the lowest levels are some pretty crazy stuff that goes on. You got some of the low level ETs, you know, that are not very benevolent. They're very self-serving. And then in the mid levels, you have everyday people just reincarnating. In the high levels, you have guides and teachers that are helping people, but they're still stuck on the wheel. They can't get off the wheel of reincarnation because they have some program, either a religious or a cultural program, that keeps them outside of unity consciousness, keeps them stuck, you know, on the wheel.
So these entities you've had contact with, they have the ability to have physical form as well as spirit form, or
some do. Some do. A lot don't. A lot find it very, very hard to be in this frequency or this vibration. They don't take a form, but some have the capability of doing that, actually taking a form and walking right alongside of us.
Wow, very interesting. Now, based on your research, would you say that our creation stories, whether they be, you know, the biblical stories or some of the more fringe stories like the creation of the Anunnaki creation story, would you say that we were, you know, genetically manipulated by these beings? Did they have some kind of hand in our creation?
Well, we know just because of artifacts like Michael Cremo talks about it. We've had advanced cultures walking on the planet for like 600 million years. So we've had a lot of civilizations that have come here that had to start over, you know, as primitives due to like meteor impacts and pole shifts, and you know, that whole antediluvian society, you know, that was under the ice that they're digging up right now in Antarctica is part of that process. So our history goes back much, much further. And some of the most ancient history actually began in Australia. And the Aboriginal elders will tell you, I spent a lot of time with them. And the gold that the Egyptians wore, their breastplates and things like that, came from Ballarat, Australia. And so there was a Denisovian man that they actually came down, and this is all written in stone. It's written in the Gosford glyphs. It's all written right there, the whole history of Earth. And it shows, you know, more than one attempt to colonize the Earth and how they added their DNA to ours and how they jumped up a man that was developing here naturally and used him. It's a different story. A lot of people want to make it into a really bad thing, but it really wasn't. What happened is their planet was dying, and they're trying to save their planet, their group, and also too, they gave us an uplink, you know, a huge jump in genetics. They gave us the genes of the gods, basically, and you know, that's why all the other ones are abducting us, because they want our genes, you know. And we're not using them, unfortunately, you know. So they're not active. But all that junk DNA isn't junk; it's just not active.
So you would definitely say, I mean, they had a hand in our creation. Did they use, you know, beings that were already on our planet as part of the engineering?
Yes. So I don't know what created. They said there was a human forming here naturally, that when they came here, and they upgraded it. Whoever created that being, I'm not sure of. That goes way, way back. It probably goes back into like Elohim or some other stepping down of, you know, the gods doing something. But it's very, very ancient. But definitely, you know, our history, it goes way, way back, and there's been a series of colonization programs and terraforming here on the Earth. And we're a huge genetic soup of all kinds of people. And the genome experiment proves that we all have Aboriginal genes in us, all of us do. So we do have a common ancestor, and we do have common DNA, as well as all the other DNA, you know.
Yeah. Now, these ancient beings that came down and helped us along, would you say that some of them are still around today and maybe pulling the strings?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there's two groups. There's the fallen ones, you know, they call them the fallen Anunnaki, and then there's the benevolent Anunnaki that stayed within universal law, and they continued. And so the good news is the benevolent Anunnaki are coming back now, and they're pulling the fallen ones before the councils and saying, you totally blew it. You stepped out of universal law, and it's time to straighten up your act, and clean up your act. And then you've got the Pleiadians, the Orion Council of Light, the Andromedans, Arcturians, and the Sirians. All those guys are they're all benevolent, and they're here to help with this shift. And so there's a big cleanup. It goes back to Marduk when he made a pact with the Reptilians, and for total supremacy, even against his own people. And we're still under that draconian grid, you might say, or draconian law. And we're coming out of that right now. There's a big push to get back to, individual freedom and prosperity and things of that nature that align more with universal law.
So you mentioned Dracos. I've heard from many sources that we've been under the control of reptilians for a while. When did that start? Or were they originally from here? Did they come from somewhere else?
Well, there's talk of a very ancient race that was here, but you're never going to see them. They're very, they keep to themselves. They don't interact with humanity. But the Dracos actually came from the Draco system, basically. And they came in with Marduk when he wanted total supremacy. And they kept breaking deals. When the Pleiadians were terraforming the earth, they had a deal with them. And as soon as they uncloaked their ships, they fired on them. And so there's a long history of, let's say, treaties broken and not honoring. They're just out for themselves. A lot of them, most of them are just out for themselves and whatever they can get. That they have a different mindset than we do.
So, would you say that some of the higher ups, elites, in our world, are still doing some kind of deals with these reptilians?
Wow. I lost you there for a second. It's
when
we talk about this subject, everything's going to freeze up. Just a little heads up. But
no, that's okay. I was asking if you think some of the elites that are in control today are still have contact with these reptilians. Are they, pulling the strings still?
Well, that's exactly why there's so much inhumanity on the planet, because there's non-human influences. And a lot of their rituals, they're just after power and wealth, basically, and they don't care how they get it or where they get it from. And so they do all these rituals and ceremonies, and it even ties into all the pedophile, child sacrificing things going on that they don't want you talking about. But it's that's exactly the source of it. And there's other sources as well, some unseen sources, like there's serpent beings and there's hybrids and reptilian gray hybrids. There's a few things out there you don't want to engage. You don't want to deal with them.
Wow. And you had mentioned that there's a war basically going on.
Yeah.
Talk a little about that. What, who is the war between? I know it's between, obviously the reptilians and some of the other races involved, and what's going on with this?
Well, there's some malevolent grays, some tall grays. There's some, reptilian beings. There are some serpent beings, and there's fallen Anunnaki, and those are the main players.
Did they have some sort of like alliance together, or are they just out for each other?
Well, it is an alliance, but they're also out for each other. It's kind of a sloppy alliance, because they really don't know how to cooperate very well, other than with their own people. But it's being torn apart right now. It's falling down due to the interactions with the benevolent ones that are coming in very strong, and there's a whole Earth liberation force that's coming through right now to free the planet. And you're going to see, a lot of it's those booms in the sky and those underground quakes that aren't really quakes and things like that. That's most of it. But most people won't see this war. They won't see what's going on. They'll just see the physical counterpart as these structures start unwinding and unfolding. And a lot of these guys are going to be taken down and, end up in handcuffs, basically. You'll see that part of it, but most of the non-physical stuff, most people won't even be aware of.
Yeah, and we're already seeing a lot of that. A lot of this stuff coming out with the pedophile rings and just a lot of the negativity just coming out. Now, you were saying that they have underground bases. Is there, some sort of physical war going on down there?
Well, yeah, there's the white hats, that on the highest level are aligned with the Galactic Federation, and they're together. They're taking out these underground bases where all this malevolent activity has been going on.
Wow, very fascinating. So, how, are we winning? Is this war is obviously going good?
Yeah, we can't lose. We can't lose because those guys are not frequency specific to the planet and where it's going. The Earth's evolving, and our whole universe is evolving, because especially our solar system is going to a highly energized place in space right now, and they're not doing too well with it, and they're not frequency specific to this process that's going on. So all they're doing is making it harder for themselves. The only option they have right now is to basically surrender and get into alignment with the awakening healing process, and then a lot of forgiveness will come their way. But if they don't, they're going to be their own worst enemies. The action reaction thing is, it's almost like instant karma is going to be taking place.
And you said we were going through a part of space with a different energy. Does that have to do with all the Earth changes we're seeing right now? Yeah,
definitely. The Schumann resonance is off the scale. NASA finally released the charts for the cosmic energies that are bombarding the planet right now, and that creates changes all the way down to the DNA. The center of the Milky Way, there's massive gamma bursts coming from that. That's saying we're going to the next level. So all of that's measurable. People don't know the impact of that and how it's going to impact us physically, because that's what most people focus on. But the impact is immense, and you probably notice how a lot of people are just losing it right now, because everything's coming up for them. All their old wounds and traumas and wrong conclusions, the negative alliances, all that stuff is all coming to the surface for people to see. And the masks are coming down, and everybody's starting to see these people for who they are.
Yeah, I mean, we do see a lot of this exposing going on, and it's fascinating. Yeah. Now, I wanted to get back to a little bit about secret space and things that our government is hiding from us. And I've always been fascinated, with the moon and Mars. Do we have bases on the moon? And was there a civilization on Mars, or was there ever once a civilization?
Yeah, actually Mars was totally inhabited, and at one time it lost its atmosphere when Maldek or Malona, whatever name you want to give it, blew up and became the asteroid belt. And there's other things that happened, but Mars was totally inhabited. It's still inhabited right now, and we have bases, since the late 60s. We've been going back and forth to the moon and Mars. We've had that technology. And, a lot of the Lockheed guys, executives, have talked about that, right? And then they got snuffed right afterwards, basically. But I'm trying to remember his name, but one of them, talked about that. He said, we can take ET home. And next thing you know, he's dead, basically. So,
wow, it's amazing. So these bases, you would say there's plenty of different races that occupy these bases from our solar system and beyond?
Yeah, it seems to be. And that's a real gray area, not to make a pun, but there's grays involved in that. But it's really tricky. Now, that area, I don't have the expertise, and I know they exist. I know some of the history and everything else. I don't know. I focus more on the benevolent ones, and I know who those groups are. Mm-hmm. But there's something happening within those ranks of the secret space fleet. And I know the Marines and most of the Navy are aligned with this, this shift coming. And the Navy would be they're the ones that would be in charge of the secret space fleet. And that's where all the funding goes, all the money goes. So from what I know, there's a shift happening on those levels. Now, I don't know if it's completely shifted and they're getting on the right side of the fence or not, or if there's still some elements that are still tied into the Illuminati or New World Order. But from what I've heard, and this is just from what I've heard from inside people, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of this, but they said there was a kind of a civil war going on, just like we're moving into a kind of a hidden civil war. There's one there as well where the white hats and the benevolent ones are taking all this technology back and out of the hands of the Illuminati, and they're getting on the right side of the fence. And I really hope that's true.
Yeah, I do too. Now, where do you see us going within 5 years? First, do you see disclosure anytime soon?
Yeah. Well, disclosure is going to come from them. You know, the ETs are going to do it. One of the problems with disclosure is the whole UFO, most of ufology, I would say the whole, is riddled with shills and planned opposition, and a lot of the people that are shaking their fist and saying things against the government and everything are working for the government. They have a program where it's called planned opposition, that we would riot and we do our own research if we didn't have a savior. And so they actually installed the saviors, and a lot of them are on the dole, and it's kind of sad because it's replete throughout ufology, even spirituality. They creating these think tanks on major mind control programs. And a lot of the New Age teachings, people don't realize, came out of a think tank. They came out of Stanford University, and they're geared that don't look at evil. If you look at evil, you're fear porn, or if you see the negativity, it's in you. And they have all these programs to get you not to recognize that there is a presence here on Earth that's not in our highest and best good. So people need to find more balance and realize, there is a dark side, and enlightenment means to be in knowledge of the whole enchilada, not just a half truth, like everything is good and everything is love and everything is joy. In some civilizations that's true, but not on Earth.
Okay, so these entities that you were talking about, not the reptilians, but the some of this more spiritual entities or lower vibrational entities. What kind of control do they have, and what is their role? Is it like the traditional heaven and hell, angels and demons, that sort of thing? Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, you can't really pigeonhole it into one category. It's like I was saying, when you have the grays, it's a real gray area, because you've got some grays that are just little robots, or just little biological robots, and they're sent to do a task. And it depends on who's controlling them as to what's going on. There are some malevolent grays that you definitely want to avoid, and I've had encounters with them, and it was very painful. I mean, they have incredible mind power, and they can blank you out, and they can make you feel like you're going to die in the next moment, just intense dread. They have that ability. There's others, the reptilians do a lot of mind games too as well. And so what it all boils down to is, if you're only using 10% of your brain, who's in the other 80%, so.
Right.
So we have to activate, we have to activate our own brains, and then they don't have any control over us.
Very interesting. Now, we all have heard stories of Germany having involvement with off-world entities during World War II, and Hitler very involved in the occult. Do you have any information about that? Did you do any research into that?
Definitely. I have some very high connections, both with Germany and I can't mention, but but I got the whole story. Hitler wasn't killed. He went to Argentina, where he continued. There's a lot of blue-eyed, blonde-haired Germans there, and over in Argentina. That's where that comes from. But he continued. They had a base. They had technology. They actually had the atomic bomb, but they decided not to use it because it was too horrendous. They said they didn't know what the ramifications would be of that, if it ignite the whole atmosphere and destroy everything on the planet, so they were a lot further along than people think. And that's why we, bagged a bunch of their scientists and brought them over here with that Operation Paperclip to get that technology. But a lot of that, there's two sides to NASA. They have the window dressing, we're shooting up people on these giant firecrackers and rockets. And then they have the other side, where it doesn't cost them anything to go back and forth to the moon. So there's there's two different sides. You know, you've got the secret space fleet, and then you got NASA as the window dressing.
So you would say our secret space program basically was birthed from that era in Nazi Germany.
Yeah, a lot of it, and also from other. See, the Germans, I think, were the first ones to be operating, you know, with contact and both crash retrieval technology, and they were back engineering it, you know, quite a long time ago. I mean, look at the cars they build. You know, they know how to build things. But that went off, that went astray, and then you know, Hitler lost it. And you know, he started out great. He was a vegetarian, an artist, and he wanted to, you know, end disease and everything else. And then he went fanatical, and then decided, you know, that he was going to create a super race and destroy everybody else that didn't match his race. And you know, he lost it. And that's unfortunately, that's what happens with almost any leader. It's very hard for a leader of that many people anywhere on the planet to hold that heart space or stay in the heart. They get taken over by these other forces, and to hold your own against these forces is not easy. And so they love positions of power and taking over those positions and then manipulating everybody, you know, actually even feeding off of people's energies on the lower levels. So it's something we have to stop doing. We have to stop giving our power away to external forces and pull our energies back in, you know, to ourselves and make our own personal connection, you know, with source. And, you know, we're like batteries. We're leaking and we're running to this group and that group and this teacher and that teacher, and we're forgetting our own connection.
Now, what kind of entities was Hitler and the Germans working with? Were they interdimensional or grays?
Well, they had both, and they had a lot of different contacts going. They had channelers that were channeling some women, beautiful women that were actually channeling, and then that got hijacked. You know, that was supposed to go for the good, and that got hijacked. And you know, they had all kinds of things going on there. So I'm not sure exactly who they were. I think one of the women said they were talking to these beings on altar or something, and there's some weird beings coming out of that section. There's some, you know, that movie Fifth Element, those pig head beings. Yeah, they actually exist. That's where they come from, that altar place, and they love piggybacking on people, you know. And so, you know, could be that's who they're working with, or they might have been working with Palladians or something. And it went sour. I'm not sure.
Now, Antarctica, did the Germans have a base in Antarctica that they were using?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of different stories about that. What I heard was they went there, and then they, you know, a lot of the Germans didn't agree with Hitler, and they weren't part of that. You know, they didn't want to be a part of that. They just wanted to do their science, and, you know, and they went there, and then what happened is they met another race of beings there that were extremely advanced and more benevolent, more loving, and so they had to change their ways, and they had to go through a shift in consciousness. And you know, we sent our fleet down there. You know, that I think it was Operation High Jump. Everybody has a different name for it, but it didn't work out too well. You know, we sent a bunch of ships there, and you know, a ship is a sitting duck, you know, with their technology. And I guess there was a bit of a skirmish down there, and they came back with their tail between their legs. But there's a lot going on in Antarctica, and there's a lot of different beings. And basically, you know, if we went there in peace, there probably wouldn't be a problem. But when we go there aggressively, it doesn't turn out very good.
Yeah, recently we had a lot of world leaders and, you know, astronauts and a lot of people going to visit Antarctica. Can you tell us a little bit about what was going on there?
They all lost it after they went there too. I don't think they have the consciousness to engage these things, and you know, I'm not sure that's pretty tight, the information coming out there, and you hear a lot of stories from people about what's there. I know when the pole shifted, there was some races there, they were like the Coneheads, that were digging their skulls up now. And, that's what we call them. Call them the Coneheads.
Yeah.
But a lot of the Egyptian pharaohs, they wore those big tall hats because they had the Coneheads. But they were there. They were doing a lot of experimentation on other beings as well. And there's feline beings that were there. A lot of different beings were there at the time. And we've had a lot of contact with the feline beings, and they're very benevolent. They're fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensional beings. And they're replete throughout history. If you read the Vedas and things like that, they talk about them. And I think it's Narissa is the guardian, of Lakshmi and the gods and things like that. So very tall lion being, but they're back, and they're back with the benevolent Anunnaki, and they're here to free us, basically. They're here for planetary liberation.
Yeah, you see in a lot of ancient mythology, people with beings with cat heads and bird heads, and so I'm guessing these entities are actually out there, and they've been
I haven't seen any
for years.
Yeah, I haven't seen the bird head ones, but I've seen the feline ones. Really? I've seen some other ones that are really different looking. Most of the ones that I've been meeting with look similar to us, and I think they chose that for a reason. They didn't want to freak me out too bad. But I've seen some really short little guys. I've seen blue skin beings. I've seen feline beings. The mantis beings. I've seen those, and grays, and a lot of different beings out there. I even saw one with looked like he had a little dog head, like a beagle.
Wow.
But he was wearing robes. He was very powerful.
That's amazing. Now, are you still in contact with any of these entities?
Yeah, most of them are just a thought away. They're just, they're extremely telepathic on their level. And you can go into meditation and just tune into them and sit right in front of you. They're just in the next dimension, basically.
Now, speaking of, being just in the next dimension, I know earlier you were talking about these entities that basically feed off of our energy, these lower level beings. Now, do they have any control in our world, or is that with the the pedophilia and the sacrifices, do they have anything to do with this?
Yeah, they're the head of the food chain, basically. They're very involved in all of that. But luckily, the benevolent ones are coming in and starting to take care of that. But the people right now, I know my phones and emails and everything are just off the scale. I'm in touch with several other healers, and they're all saying the same thing. And people are just being attacked like crazy right now because the energies coming in are so strong. It's just pushing them up to the surface. So we're getting a lot of intense clearing work. There, we have people that have attachments on them, that they in air, they hooked up with somebody that was working with low-level beings and didn't know it, and then they come back and these things are attached to them. And there's something really dangerous going on in the UFO community where they're saying all ETs are benevolent, and we need to stop being spiritual snobs and open wide and let them jump into our bodies. And a certain person is saying stuff like that. And that's the most irresponsible thing I've ever heard, because you just don't let anything jump into your body. You may not be able to, it'll own you, you won't be able to get rid of it.
Now, would this be considered the same thing as like demonic possession?
Pretty much, yeah. It's pretty much the same thing, but just different group, different beings. And a lot of them just influence. They don't possess. There's beings that actually, they'll full on do a possession. And that's what the Illuminati do. They actually allow them to possess them. Yeah, they're not even there anymore. Their souls they have no access to their soul anymore. And these other entities come in, and it's by their choice, through these rituals and sacrifices and things. But the other ones can just be influencing. They'll influence you. And, and a lot of people, all of a sudden, they'll get really sad or really angry and not have any reason why. And it's because these beings have mental and emotional bodies. You may not be able to see them physically, and they can influence people very easily.
Now, you mentioned the Illuminati. Now, are the Illuminati specific bloodlines that are linked to these ancient beings?
It's really interesting. The Illuminati, there's some good ones, that haven't gone bad, and there's some that have gone really bad, so it's I don't want to classify them all in that group. There's some that are just kind of neutral. They're just kind of neutral and letting this play out, and so it's mixed. And yeah, there are some of them are bloodlines, and some of them are wannabes. They just want to be rich and famous, so they hook into these same beings. And Hollywood's a great example of that. You look at what's happening in Hollywood right now, and the whole movie industry, that's a mess. That's very plugged into that kind of energy.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about. You see a lot of the not only occult symbolism, but you can see where Hollywood is pushing people. And I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about that. What are they trying to do, and what is the end goal?
Well, Hollywood, Hollywood, that's what you make your wand out of if you're a sorcerer, basically, so that's where that comes from. But it's all about mind control, and it's about controlling the masses and feeding off the masses, and look at the billions of dollars and resources that go into that, and then where do they go? They don't go to help humanity. They just go for lavish lifestyles, and it's sad, but most of those guys all end up in the gutter. They don't have a very happy life or a very long life, and until the next guy comes along. So it's sad that people worship these people and they don't know them. If they hung around them for a while, they wouldn't be worshiping them if they watched how they behave. But most of it just fake. It's all fake. They're very upset, especially with the whole pedophile thing going down. They're very, the ones screaming the loudest, against the shift that's happening are the ones that are the most guilty, so they're all being exposed right now. And even within the industry, a lot of the people that are victims of it are speaking out now. So, and a lot of people that were aligned with that network are being killed right now. There's major murders going on, and because they don't want them talking. This whole Nexum thing, a lot of the women connected to that are being found dead right now. So, it's not pretty. It's not the way to go. You want to stay away from that kind of nonsense.
Now, where do you see people going? I see a lot of people de-evolving. I see a lot of people evolving. There seems to be a shift in consciousness, and there seems to be some people going the opposite way. Where do you see humanity as a whole going within the next 5 or 10 years?
The Hopi prophecy talks about this, and they said there's 2 lines of evolution. And one line takes the spiritual path where they work in harmony with each other and the planet, and they take a spiritual evolution path. And the other path goes down in the downward spiral, and it just quits. It just fizzles out and ends. And I see that's what's happening to people by their choices. The people that want to live a natural spiritual life in harmony with each other and nature and make their own personal connection with source, whatever name you want to give it, are going, they're taking the upward spiral, and it's not easy. You're going to get hit all along the way. There's an old saying, the closer you get to nirvana, the more the demons rear their ugly heads, so it is challenging to take that path, but the other path goes nowhere. It's going to end up in total collapse, so that world is going to end. It's going to come to an end, and they're not frequency specific to the earth and her evolution. So that's the thing, is we have to get with this program, and it's so big, no man can stop it. The Illuminati can't stop it, neither can their puppets. They're puppet masters. They're done.
So with the earth changes occurring, how far do you think that's going to go? Are we going to see some major cataclysms in the near future?
I've been looking at this, and there's a good chance that there's going to be 2 timelines. And they're splitting. It almost looks like they're splitting. And one group is going to go in one direction, another group is going to go in another direction. Some are going to go through horrendous earth changes, and some are just going to go through some changes, and some are going to miss it altogether. So I think it depends on your consciousness and where you're at as to how you experience it. And I know when you're tapped in your higher self, it'll guide you, it'll move you out of harm's way. And so all these things could be happening, and it'll just steer you out. But the people that aren't connected they're going to be caught off guard. They're not going to have any idea what's coming or any of this.
And you mentioned different timelines. So we're living in a sort of a multiverse, you would say?
Yeah. There's multiple timelines. There's multiple. It's hard to explain, but we're not just a body and a personality. We're not locked into this reality. We're a spiritual being that has a body and a personality, and that spiritual being is multidimensional. So we go all the way back to the source, basically. And but most people are just operating from a body and a personality, and this sounds like nonsense to them because they haven't had access, to the higher levels. But the more you gain access, you see that things are not that pliable. They're not as fixed. They're more pliable. And the more you engage your practices, like up here when we do Qigong and we do a lot of these practices, there's people that actually vanish. You can see the chair right through them. And it happens on a regular basis. So it's really not that hard to phase out from this reality into a different reality.
So speaking of that, for people who are, just trying to better their lives, eat better, become more spiritual, meditate, how can people go about getting started doing this the best way? And, maybe if you could give us few tips on how to get us started,
Yeah. I think the first thing that people really need to learn is how to heal unseen negative influences and how to stay in their own self-authority and maintain their own fields before you start engaging in anything. That's like a must. And we have that on our website. It's free. It's in all the books. I explain it in the books. And then, meditation is important, a good diet, fresh water, sunshine, get out in nature as much as you can. There's other practices, yoga, things like that. But mainly right now, we really need to do a lot of process-oriented therapy and heal the old wounds and traumas and wrong conclusions from past experiences, because that's what holds us down, holds us back. And so the more we clear that, the more our frequencies go up. And so thought has a frequency, and fear, guilt, and unworthiness and trauma, all that stuff has a frequency to it and holds you down. And unfortunately, most of the religions are teaching fear, guilt, and unworthiness, and an external God, not an internal God, so they have it backwards. And so you have to get out of there and make your own connection. I think nature is the best way to do it. And there are some people that have that connection that can help you. There's lamas and yogis that can help you, but even you have to be very discerning there, because there's a lot of them that are hooking people and just feeding off their energies as well. So the main thing is to be very discerning. Are they empowering you to make your own personal connection with source? Are they educating you? Are they creating a dependency? Are they empowering you as an individual? We have to really look at that. And when you hear somebody talk, if they're going, I did this, I did this, I did this, and when I did this, and I did this, when you hear that over and over again, they're coming from the ego, and they're not enlightened, So you can use that for discernment. And there's a lot of things. Like a lot of the Native Americans, they don't have I, they have we. That there is no I in their vocabulary. It's not used. So it's important that we get back to that. And a lot of times that we means your multidimensional self, not just the personality here,
Yeah. Now, if one, how should I put this? Can anyone get in touch with these entities? Or do you have to have some kind of certain mindset?
Yeah. Well, you have to come through me and my course and spend $3,000. and then you can have contact. No, I'm just kidding. That's what a lot of people are doing out there, and that you got to avoid that. Basically anybody can connect. It's actually very important to qualify the connection when you do it, and come through the heart and send out love and joy and bliss. And it's the mind in which you seek is the mind in which you connect, and learn how to clear unseen negative influences, and trust your feeling. If it doesn't feel right, just cut off the connection, and you can call the higher beings in to take them off and do whatever needs to be done. But that's part of the clearing process, but anybody can do it. And what I find out is some of the people that seem to be intellectually brilliant are emotionally stunted, and it's through the heart that you connect. It's not through the mind. Your soul sits right next to the heart, and there's more electrical energy in the heart than the brain, and the soul connects to the source, to spirit, and that's how you connect. And the more intellectual it is, the more complicated it is, the less effective it is. And so when you do Qigong and these other practices, it's called the art of no mind. And you're giving your body something to do, and you're moving both sides of your body at the same time, which balances out both sides of your brain. And so your intellect is busy operating the body, and then that gives spirit a chance to come in, And so there's a lot of very ancient practices that help you to make these connections.
So when you're practicing these, should people be cautious of the entities they're trying to make contact with?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. We have a saying, just because you're dead doesn't mean you're enlightened, and just because you're an ET doesn't mean you're benevolent. And luckily, a lot of the malevolent stuff is being cleaned up right now, so it's going to be a lot easier, And that's something we do here, because we're sitting on a stargate, like a vortex, and we're constantly clearing these energies, and it helps the whole planet out. But it gets grueling, It's like 3 or 4 times a day we have to do, clear energies to maintain that energy here, But yeah, it's important to learn how to heal and clear these unseen negative influences, and trust your own BS meter. And if if it doesn't feel right, if it's disempowering, just walk away from it.
Right. Now, getting back to, you were saying how we could essentially control our own existence in this multiverse just by what we're projecting, would you say?
Yeah, exactly. It's even when you cross over and you die, your consciousness has a frequency, a vibration to it, and it's the collective attitudes and emotions you've embraced to be your reality. And so if you have a lot of fear and guilt and pain and suffering, and that you're operating from a very low frequency, and that's going to determine where you go in the next understanding. If you're focused on love and joy and bliss, and your forgiveness, and you're practicing loving detachment, and you're out in nature a lot, you're going to go to the highest levels. And it's all about frequency and understanding consciousness and frequency, and that's the key to it all.
So you'd say our existence is basically a giant training ground for the next level.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, there's an old saying, the bravest of angels are the ones that came to earth, because there's a bonus here and a trap at the same time. And so if you can get through this and master your emotions and free will, and learn that loving detachment, then you go to the highest levels. But you can get caught. You can get caught here in all the drama and all the pain and suffering and things like that. So it's kind of a bonus round or a trap. It can be either one, and it's just how we frame things. We can reframe things and forgive and release and let go of these things, because I always tell people, the ultimate weapon on the planet is called forgiveness. And people don't understand that. I said, if you want to get even with somebody, forgive them, because it goes out of your field and it goes back to them, and they're going to create a reality around that. And it gets energized, but you can't do it that way. I mean, it has to be soul felt when you do it. But if you don't forgive somebody, you're tied to them, and you'll continue to play this out, many, many lives ahead, or you'll draw other people to you that are of like mind. They're going to be doing the same thing, because that's you're holding that pattern, you know. So it's so important to release these patterns, release the past, and move forward.
So would you say we would be sort of reincarnated if we don't learn the correct lessons?
Well, yeah, you're on the wheel. You just keep going on the wheel over and over again, you know, and it's, you know, the source just says as you wish, you know. It can't judge. It doesn't have an ego. It just allows us to make choices, and those choices have consequences or benefits, one or the other. And that's what free will is all about. And so it just says as you wish. And so if you're walking around going, everybody's evil, I hate this planet, it sucks, and things like that, that's the world you're going to create, and that's what you're going to magnetize to you. You know, if you start, you know, if you say everything's love and joy and bliss, and, you know, you can focus on that. But I take a more balanced approach to it. I realize that this world is a mess. It needs help. And there needs to be a major planetary, you know, lifting happening here. You know, it's, you know, liberation needs to happen. And we've been so manipulated for so many years under this draconian grid. We need some major divine intervention to get out from under it. And that's what's coming. And then people can start making better choices.
I hope so. I mean, we are starting to see a lot of changes occur, a lot of big changes. And earlier you had said disclosure was going to come from them.
Yeah.
How far away do you think we are from that?
Well, in my book, disclosure's already happened, because some ships flew over Texas, and they did a poll right after that. 99% of the people said they believe UFOs exist. Excuse me. And there's a government cover-up. So you look at those numbers, they're always in the high 80s. And so the cover-up is a total fail. You know, it's already failed. But people are locked into getting a government that's lied to us for over 60 years to tell us the truth. And that's giving your power away. Why do we need their blessing? I mean, and they're going to twist it. Whatever they tell us, they're going to twist it, you know. So to me, I think it's important that each individual does their own research. And they have people in place to keep that going, to keep all the power going to them. It's called a controlled narrative. And I'm working on the uncontrolled narrative right now. It's going to be interesting. But I did a talk on that at Contact in the Desert, and it was very well received. And I said, look, the controlled narrative is to keep it in the past, keep everybody's head cranked back to Roswell and all the other, you know, things. And a lot of these things are talking about happened 40 to 60 years ago. And it's also to keep it nuts and bolts, you know, and keep it, you know, in the metal secret stuff. But that's just a little piece of the pie. The big picture is it's multidimensional. We need to ask questions. Who are they? Why are they here? What are their cultures like? I mean, it's already known. I mean, we already know they're here. I mean, everybody knows they're here. But why not go to the next level and start talking about who they are, why they're here, how do they live, what kind of technology, do they have healing technology, free energy? We need to start asking those questions and going in that direction. And there is a group out there that's doing all they can to stop that information from getting out.
Well, like you said, hopefully we can defeat that group, and this information can get out for everyone. It would be awesome. It'd be fascinating. And I'd like you to take the last few minutes that we have here to give us any messages you'd like to give us, or you know, anything you got going on with you coming up.
Yeah, we've got a major conference here. We've got great speakers coming up here on July 4th weekend. And then we have Soul Tech, Jimmy Church, and that group is coming out in August. We have another one, and we have ongoing sky watches, but we want people to come up and have their own experience, you know, not just believe us. I mean, we have the footage and the pictures and thousands of witnesses, and we have triple PhD Boeing engineers and Lockheed, Skunk Works guy, everybody testifying, you know, about the ships up here. That's a given, but it's really important that people come and have their own experience, and then nobody can take it away from them. And that cracks the egg, you know, it puts a crack in the door. And once that door is open, they usually take it the rest of the way. And that's more important. And I think it's so important right now to just keep an open mind, a loving heart, and pure intent. And that's all you need. That's the prerequisites for contact. And, you know, you don't need to be a rocket scientist. You just need to be a good person, basically, if you want to have contact. And it's all about intention. You know, focus your intention on it and qualify that intention. You know, just say, I want benevolent beings that are here to help humanity, you know, and the earth in the awakening and healing process. And, you know, really qualify that when you're putting that intention out there.
All right. Well, thank you. James, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'd love to have you back on sometime.
Sure.
It was awesome. And you have a great night, James. I thank you again.
All right. You keep up the good work too.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.